My name is Claire Anderson, and if you stay with me, I'll tell you the story of how one phone call destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. That morning began like any other in Seattle. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete after a light drizzled tulips pushed through the soil along the sidewalk, and I carried my travel mug of lukewarm coffee as I rushed out the door. I hadn't eaten breakfast, hadn't even finished brushing my hair properly, but none of that mattered. I was late for my shift at the pharmacy again. Still, for a moment, there was peace. Neighbors waved. A delivery man nodded. The sky was brighter than it had been in weeks. I remember thinking maybe life was turning a corner. And then my phone rang. I answered on the third ring, still walking quickly. Hello? Mrs. Anderson. The voice was unfamiliar, deep professional. Yes, I said cautiously. This is Mark Holloway, Adams' site supervisor. There's been an accident. The world around me froze. An accident. The crowd on the street kept moving, horns blared, birds sang, but all I could hear was the thud of blood in my ears. Is he? My voice broke. He's alive, Mark rushed to add, but it's serious. They've taken him to Harborview Medical. You need to come now. Alive. The word should have calmed me, but it didn't. It only twisted tighter around my chest. My husband wasn't supposed to be anywhere near danger. He designed buildings, he argued over zoning permits. He was never supposed to be beneath collapsing beams. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember unlocking the car. I only remember the steering wheel slick beneath my palms, knuckles white as I gripped it. Every light, every turn blurred. Harborview. That was the only thought in my head. Images I didn't want flooded me. Adam crushed under concrete. Adam gasping for breath. Adam whispering my name into chaos. By the time the sliding glass doors of the ER parted, my lungs were burning and my heart hammered so violently I thought it might stop. Adam Anderson, I stammered at the desk. He was brought in. The nurse gave me a look I would soon come to dread, kind but guarded. He's in surgery, she said softly. The floor disappeared. Surgery meant blood, meant broken bones, meant the future cracking open at my feet. I collapsed into a plastic chair surrounded by humming vending machines and buzzing lights as though the whole world had narrowed to beige walls and sterile air. That morning had started with sunshine. Now it was gone, replaced by silence so sharp it rang in my ears. And in that silence I knew life had just split into before and after. And this was only the beginning. The minutes bled into hours, and the hospital waiting room turned into its own kind of prison. Beige walls, plastic chairs, the hum of a vending machine in the corner, it all pressed down on me. Every time the automatic doors slid open, I looked up expecting someone to tell me Adam was gone. When the surgeon finally appeared, his face was the color of exhaustion. Surgical cap flattened against messy hair glasses slipping down his nose. I shot to my feet. I'm Claire Anderson, my husband Adam. He raised his hand, gently steadying my panic. He made it through surgery. The words barely landed before he added the part that shattered me. Your husband suffered a severe spinal injury. A section of material collapsed and struck his lower back. We relieved the swelling, stabilized him, but it's too soon to know about long-term mobility. My mouth went dry. Will he walk again? The pause was brutal. He didn't need to answer. His eyes told me everything. Finally, he said, "There's a chance of paralysis. We'll know more when he wakes." I nodded, though the air seemed too heavy to breathe. My hands found the back of a chair to keep me from falling. The doctor gave a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes, then walked away. That's when the tears came hot and violent, spilling into my palms. The next morning, a nurse guided me into Adam's recovery room. Machines beeped steadily, tubes and wires tangled around him. He looked thinner, somehow pale against the stark white sheets. When his eyes fluttered open, I leaned close. "I'm here," I whispered, gripping his cold hand. "Claire," he said weakly. "I'm right here, you're okay." But he wasn't okay. His eyes shifted toward the blanket covering his legs, and something like shame clouded his face. "I can't feel them," he whispered. "My legs. Nothing." The words split me in two. I wanted to scream, but instead I brushed his hand. "It could be the anesthesia. The doctor said it's too soon. These things take time." But Adam only closed his eyes, silent, as if my hope was too heavy to carry. I stepped outside to make calls. The first was to our daughter Emily, away at college 100 miles south. I tried to sound steady. "Sweetheart, your dad's been in an accident. He's alive, but..." It's serious. She cried, begged to come home, but I told her no. Focus on your studies, I've got this. My voice cracked on the lie. The second call was harder. Adam's mother, Margaret. The moment I explained, her voice sharpened like a knife. I'll be there tomorrow. My son needs me. I tried to protest. She didn't ask. She announced, I'll be there. And she was. At exactly 7:00 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it in my robe, hair still damp, and there she stood, suitcase in one hand, garment bag in the other, like she was checking into a hotel. I took the first Greyhound, she declared. He needs me. Before I could respond, she swept past me, perfume, trailing like a warning. She dropped her bags in the hallway, glanced around the apartment with disapproval carved into her face. I'll take the guest room, or rather that couch, since you never thought to prepare properly. I bit my tongue. Coffee? No need. Yours is too weak. I brought my own. I forced a smile, but inside dread coiled tighter. At the hospital, Margaret transformed into a general. She barked orders at nurses, rearranged pillows, scolded staff for delays. This mattress is too firm. My son has a spinal injury, not a paper cut. I tried to soften the edges to keep peace, but it was like chasing a storm with an umbrella. Adam lay silent, his eyes darting between us like a referee who never wanted the job. He didn't intervene, maybe because he couldn't. But Margaret had already chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. That night, as I collapsed into the hospital chair beside him, exhaustion crushing every bone, I whispered a promise. I'll do whatever it takes, Adam. I'll help you walk again. I didn't know then what whatever it takes would cost me. Before I continue, let me ask, have you ever made a promise so heavy you weren't sure you could keep it? Share your thoughts below. And if you're still with me, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this story, because what came next would test me in ways I never imagined. When Margaret planted herself in our lives, it wasn't as a guest. It was as a conqueror. She swept into Adam's hospital room with the confidence of someone who believed every nurse, every doctor, even I, worked under her command. Within an hour, she'd memorized the names of the staff on the floor and barked them like orders. Angela, where's the chart? Derek, adjust this bed. And you? Why hasn't someone checked the IV drip in the last 10 minutes? The nurses exchanged weary glances, but no one dared to challenge her. Margaret had that effect. Her voice wasn't loud, but sharp enough to slice through steel. I hovered by Adam's bed, clutching his hand, trying to be the calm between storms. He stared at the ceiling, eyes, hollow lips pressed shut. He didn't stop her. He never had. Every time I opened my mouth, Margaret cut me off. If I suggested adjusting his blanket, she'd swoop in, rephrase my idea louder, claiming it as her own. If I asked the nurse a question, Margaret demanded an answer before the words even left my lips. It was suffocating, like the years of biting my tongue had finally come roaring back. And the truth, it had always been this way. The first time Adam brought me home to meet her, I'd baked a pie from scratch, my best one. Adam had told me she loved homemade things. She never touched it. Instead, she eyed me from head to toe and said, "So you're the one. Small-town girl with big dreams, is that it?" I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. That was the pattern every dinner, every holiday, every visit. Margaret wielded passive aggression like a scalpel, precise cutting, always leaving a mark. The night before Adam proposed, I overheard them in the kitchen. She didn't know I was awake. Her voice cut through the dark like glass. "She's not the one, Adam. She's not good enough. No connections, no right schools. You could do better." Adam's voice was soft. "She's kind, Mom. She loves me." "She's convenient," Margaret snapped. "That's not the same." I stood in the hallway, clutching a glass of water, my heart shattering with every word. But when Adam proposed a week later in our tiny apartment, I said yes. I wanted to believe love could drown out her disapproval. But Margaret never let me forget. At our wedding, she wore gray as if she were mourning. Her toast was a knife hidden in a smile. "To Claire, you've managed to land a wonderful man. He's loyal, hardworking, and far more generous than most. And Adam, sweetheart, I always hoped you'd end up with someone extraordinary. But life gives us surprises." People laughed awkwardly. I smiled through it. That's what you do when your mother-in-law publicly calls you a consolation prize. Now, years later, nothing had changed. Watching her scold nurses and adjust Adam's pillows for the third time in 5 minutes, I felt that old tension tighten in my chest. My role once again was to shrink, to endure, to let her dominate the air in the room. That evening, when we returned to the apartment, Margaret set her suitcase in the living room and looked around like an inspector. "You still haven't painted these walls, it feels drab." And where's the proper guest space? I suppose the couch will have to do. I forced a smile. I'll get you extra blankets. No need, she waved me off. I brought my own. Yours are too thin. It was like she'd moved in permanently without asking. I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling. Adam's slow breaths rattled beside me, the weight of his silence heavier than any words. Margaret's voice carried from the couch in the living room, muffled but constant, as she called friends back home, telling them how she'd rushed to save her son. I was a footnote in my own story, and yet despite everything I still clung to the vow I'd made at his bedside. I'll do whatever it takes. But even promises can suffocate when you're the only one holding them up. Let me pause here to ask you something. Have you ever felt erased in your own life, overshadowed, until you wondered if your voice mattered at all? Drop a comment and tell me, because stories like this aren't just mine, they're ours. And if you're still here, make sure you stay with me, because what happened next pushed me to a breaking point I never thought I'd reach. Margaret's presence pulled me back into memories I had tried to bury. Each day in that hospital room was like reliving the past in slow motion, with her voice echoing all the ways I was never enough. It was impossible not to remember the first time she'd marked me as an outsider. Adam and I had only been dating for 6 months when he said, "It's time you meet my mom." I'd spent the entire afternoon baking an apple pie, his favorite, because he swore she adored homemade desserts. I wore my best dress, carefully chosen earrings, even brought a bottle of wine. I wanted to make a good impression. She opened the door, tall and polished, her eyes scanning me the way a jeweler examines glass. The first words out of her mouth weren't hello or welcome. They were, "So you're the one." No smile, no warmth, just judgment wrapped in silk. That evening was torture. She asked about my family, my job, my college. Every answer I gave was followed by a cool smile and a remark that sliced just beneath the skin. "Oh, a pharmacy tech, I suppose that's stable if not ambitious." Community college, well, practical is good for some. When dessert came, she never touched the pie. She pushed it aside as if it were beneath her. And yet I stayed. Because Adam's hand was warm on mine under the table, because he whispered, "Ignore her," when she left the room, because I wanted to believe love could drown out disapproval. But the pattern never broke. Every birthday dinner, every holiday gathering, every brief visit, Margaret found new ways to remind me I wasn't part of their world. Her criticism wasn't wild or loud. It was scalpel sharp, leaving invisible scars that only I seemed to feel. The worst wound came just before Adam proposed. I couldn't sleep one night in his old apartment, so I padded down the hall for water. That's when I heard their voices in the kitchen. The lights were off, but her tone carried. "She's not the one, Adam. She's not good enough. No real connections. No pedigree. You could do so much better." Adam sighed, his voice tired. "She's kind, Mom. She loves me." "She's convenient," Margaret snapped. "That's not the same." I stood there in the dark, clutching a glass, my heart splintering. Part of me wanted to run, to leave before she could poison me further. But then a week later, Adam knelt in our cramped apartment living room, ring in hand, eyes soft and hopeful. "Claire, will you marry me?" And I said yes, because I loved him, because I wanted to believe love was enough. On our wedding day, Margaret wore gray as though attending a funeral. She sat stiff through the vow's lips, pressed thin, never smiling for a single photo. Then came her toast. She raised her glass and said to Claire, "You've managed to land yourself a wonderful man. He's loyal, hardworking, far more generous than most. And Adam, sweetheart, I always hoped you'd find someone extraordinary, but life gives us surprises." The room went silent. Then a few awkward chuckles broke through. I smiled like brides are supposed to, even though my chest was caving in. Years later, in that hospital room, as Margaret rearranged Adam's pillow for the 3rd time, I realized nothing had changed. Her disapproval still hung like a shadow, and Adam still lay silent, refusing to step between us. It was the same cycle, her dominance, his silence, my erasure. That night, back at the apartment, Margaret commandeered the couch, spreading her belongings like a queen staking claim to new land. "You really should invest in better furniture," she said, fluffing the cushions. I shut myself in the bedroom, Adam asleep beside me, and stared at the ceiling. The vow I'd made that morning, "I'll do whatever it takes," echoed in my head. But how long could one woman carry a marriage alone against not just fate, but family? I felt small-cornered, suffocated. And yet beneath the despair, a seed of defiance stirred. One day I promised myself her voice would not be the only one that mattered. Have you ever carried the weight of someone else's judgment so long it felt like part of your skin? If you have, tell me in the comments. And stay with me because soon something happened that forced me to stop living in Margaret's shadow and start fighting for myself. The days blurred into a rhythm of sterile hospital visits and suffocating silence at home. Adam barely spoke, drifting in and out of medicated haze, and Margaret filled every pause with criticism, as though silence itself offended her. I thought things couldn't get heavier until Dr. Lee pulled me aside one morning. He was gentle, his voice low, but firm. "Claire, we've done what surgery can do. Now the real work is rehabilitation movement, stimulation, rebuilding what's been damaged. And I want to recommend someone. Arthur Blake. He's a private physical therapist, one of the best I know. He's worked miracles in cases like Adam's." He handed me a card. Arthur's name glared back in clean black print. Miracles. That word hooked me like oxygen after drowning. "How much does he charge?" I asked, already bracing for the answer. Dr. Lee's expression shifted the way people look at you when they're about to break bad news. "He's not cheap, but he's effective. I wouldn't suggest him otherwise." That night I brought it up at dinner, if you could call microwaved soup and silence a meal. Adam sat slumped, barely touching his food. Margaret perched at the table like a hawk, her eyes daring me to make a mistake. "I think we should hire Arthur," I said, sliding the card onto the table. "Dr. Lee said he's the best chance we have." Margaret scoffed. "We don't need some stranger poking at my son for $1,000 an hour. I used to coach gymnastics, remember? I know how to work with the body. I can help him." I bit back the first dozen replies that wanted to claw their way out. Instead, I said carefully, "This isn't a sprained ankle. It's spinal trauma. I gave birth to him," she snapped, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I know his body better than anyone." Adam said nothing. He just stared at his soup spoon untouched, as though the conversation didn't concern him. So I made the decision myself. I called Arthur the next morning. We'd have to dip into savings, the little nest egg we'd been building for years, but if it meant Adam had a chance at walking again, I would spend every cent. Arthur arrived that week. He was professional, calm, methodical. He set up equipment charts, exercises. He pushed Adam, but gently, encouragingly. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint flicker of hope. Margaret loomed in the background during every session, arms crossed, muttering under her breath. "Waste of time, I told you so." But I ignored her. I had to. Arthur came 3 times a week each session, a mix of sweat pain and stubborn determination. Sometimes Adam's legs twitched, and I clung to those movements like lifelines. Sometimes nothing happened, and I hid my tears in the bathroom afterward. 2 months passed. Adam still couldn't walk. But I refused to quit. I juggled work shifts, hospital bills, and the endless battle against Margaret's sharp tongue. My body began to betray me. I lost weight without trying. My back ached every time I bent down. My eyes stung from sleepless nights. Still, I pushed forward. Because I had made a promise. I'll do whatever it takes. But at what point does sacrifice turn into self-destruction? And let me ask you here, what would you have done in my place? Would you have risked everything on one man's promise of miracles, or played it safe while watching hope slip away? Share your thoughts, I really want to know. Because what happened next would prove that sometimes the biggest battles aren't against injury or money or even fate. They're against the people closest to us. Arthur's visits became the fragile thread holding my hope together. Every time he stepped through the door with his calm voice and measured confidence, I felt a little less like I was drowning. But between those sessions, life was chaos. I worked double shifts at the pharmacy, coming home to stacks of unpaid bills and Margaret's endless commentary. Nothing escaped her scrutiny. If I folded towels, she'd refold them, muttering, "This isn't a hotel, but at least try to make it look decent." If I cooked rice, she'd complain it was too dry. If I spoke too firmly to a nurse, she'd hiss that my tone was disrespectful. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Adam, meanwhile, withdrew further. He rarely looked me in the eye. He didn't ask about my day or our daughter Emily. He didn't even notice when I started staying late at work, sitting in the break room long after my shift ended, just to enjoy silence before going home. Some nights I cried in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers went numb, begging myself for the strength to walk through the apartment door. Arthur kept reminding us progress takes time. Small steps add up, he'd say, gently urging Adam to push through one more repetition. Sometimes Adam's legs would twitch or spasm, and Arthur would smile like it meant something. Margaret, of course, called it a fluke. A waste of money, she repeated, her arms folded across her chest like she was guarding her son from me, not from paralysis. And yet I kept going. The financial strain gnawed at me. Our savings had been drained to pay Arthur, and even with insurance, hospital bills piled higher each week. I skipped lunches to save money. I wore the same pair of sneakers until the soles thinned, but I couldn't let myself stop. Not when Adam's future might depend on it. The cruelest part was that my sacrifice went unseen. Adam didn't thank me. Margaret certainly didn't. In their eyes, it seemed I was either doing the bare minimum or making the wrong decisions altogether. One night after Arthur left, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face was thinner shadows carved beneath my eyes, lips pale. I didn't look like the woman Adam married. I didn't even look like myself. And in that moment, an ugly thought whispered, "Who's saving me?" But I shoved it down, because I had promised. Because I believed promises mattered. The tension in the apartment was unbearable. Margaret had settled in like she owned the place, claiming the couch as her throne. Adam barely spoke except during therapy sessions, and even then his voice was clipped, tired. I was invisible in my own home, the air thick with judgment and silence. Yet I held on to that sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, all this pain would be worth it. That one day, Adam would take a step, and everything we'd endured would finally make sense. But promises can be chains as much as they are lifelines, and mine was choking me. Before we move forward, I want to ask you something. Have you ever poured everything into saving someone only to feel yourself slowly disappearing in the process? Drop a comment if you know that exhaustion, that desperation. And don't leave yet, because what came next didn't just test my promise. It broke it wide open. The breaking point came quietly, no dramatic explosion, no screaming argument. Just a bottle. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that blurred into all the others. I was stripping the bed in our apartment, tucking the sheets tight the way Adam used to like them before the accident, when my hand brushed against something hard beneath the frame. Curious, I reached under and pulled out a half-empty bottle of whiskey. I froze. Adam had never been a whiskey man. Beer at barbecues, maybe a glass of wine at Christmas, but never this. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The label felt heavy in my hands, its glass slick against my trembling fingers. When I walked into the living room holding it, Adam didn't even look surprised. He just sighed, eyes tired, shoulders slumped. "It helps with the pain," he muttered. "There's medication for that," I snapped louder than I meant to. "Prescribed, monitored, safe." "It's not enough," he said, finally meeting my eyes. And what I saw there wasn't just pain, it was surrender. I felt my throat burn. "You're drinking alone, hiding it from me." "That's not just about pain, Adam. That's about giving up." He looked away, staring at the blank TV screen as if it might rescue him. Something inside me cracked. For weeks I had been running myself into the ground, working, paying, cooking, fighting, begging, while he let himself slip deeper into the dark. And Margaret, hovering like a hawk, was always there to remind me that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. I clenched the bottle so hard I thought it might shatter. "If you keep going down this path," I said, my voice shaking, "I can't do this anymore. I love you, Adam, but I won't drown with you. If something doesn't change, maybe we need time apart." The silence that followed was suffocating. The kind of silence that makes you wonder if you've just destroyed everything, or if you've finally told the truth. And then from the kitchen doorway, Margaret's voice sliced through like a whip. "So that's it. You're giving up, leaving him when he needs you most. What kind of wife walks out on her husband when he's down?" I turned slowly to face her, my whole body shaking. "The kind who's been holding everything together while he gave up," I said. Her eyes narrowed, lips curling into something between triumph and disgust. Adam said nothing, not a word. He just sat there, letting his mother and his wife fight over the ruins of his will. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the city traffic outside, to Margaret's muffled voice on the phone in the living room, to Adam's uneven breathing beside me. My heart felt like a stone lodged in my chest. I had promised to do whatever it took. But was this what whatever it takes meant, sacrificing myself piece by piece while he sank deeper into a bottle? I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the whiskey against the wall. But instead I curled into myself, whispering into the darkness words Adam never heard, "I'm breaking too." And that was the night I realized something terrifying. Sometimes the people you love the most can become the ones pulling you under. Let me ask you this. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you keep sacrificing, or would you draw the line? Comment below because the next turn in this story pushed me to a place I never thought I'd go. And trust me, you're going to want to hear it. The morning after the whiskey incident, I found myself sitting across from Dr. Lee again. His face was calm, but I could tell from the way his hands folded over the chart that what he was about to say wasn't going to be easy. Claire, he began, Adam has made progress with therapy, but to truly restore function, he may need spinal stabilization surgery. It's not guaranteed, but without it, his chances of walking again are very slim. My stomach dropped. Surgery? Yes, he said gently. Specialists, inpatient, rehab, long-term care, it's extensive. I want you to have all the information before making a decision. He slid a folder across the desk full of numbers and estimates that might as well have been written in fire. I flipped through the pages, eyes blurring. Tens of thousands, maybe more. My throat closed. Will insurance cover it? Not entirely, he admitted. I'm sorry. That was the moment I felt the ground tilt beneath me. All the extra hours at the pharmacy, all the pennies scraped from our dwindling savings, none of it would touch these costs. We didn't have that kind of money. Not anymore. I walked out of his office with the folder clutched to my chest like it might burn me. In the stairwell away from Margaret's sharp eyes and Adam's silence, I collapsed onto the cold steps and cried until my body shook. My sobs echoed off the concrete, and for once I didn't try to muffle them. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the muffled sound of Margaret watching reruns in the living room. Adam had gone to bed early, groggy from painkillers. The folder sat in front of me, its pages spread out like a cruel map of every dream we'd ever had slipping away. I made a list: rent, utilities, groceries, therapy sessions, already overdue. Then I added the surgery estimates. The numbers didn't add up. They never would. So I did what desperation forces you to do. I started looking for another job. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just something to bring in a little extra cash. Nights, weekends, anything. I didn't care if it was cleaning stocking shelves or scrubbing floors. Pride had no place here. Adam needed me, and if no one else was going to save him, then I would. The next day during my lunch break at the pharmacy, fate intervened. A woman rushed in, sunglasses on, asking for painkillers. I handed her the prescription bottle, and when she looked up, I froze. Claire, she said, pulling down her glasses. It took me a second, but then I recognized her, Hannah Reynolds. We'd gone to high school together. Back then, she was the quiet girl with freckles and braces. Now she looked like she owned half the city, her hair sleek, her blazer sharp. Oh my God, I can't believe this, she said, laughing. You're still in Seattle. We talked for a few minutes before my break ended. I told her about Adam in the briefest terms, the edited version that didn't include whiskey bottles or Margaret's constant presence. Then she surprised me. I manage a boutique hotel downtown, she said. We've had turnover with our cleaning staff. It's not glamorous, but the pay is decent and the hours are flexible. Interested? I nodded before she even finished. I really am. Great, she said, smiling. Come tomorrow, I'll show you around. That night, I didn't tell Adam or Margaret. Instead, I quietly packed a pair of sneakers in my bag. After my pharmacy shift, I changed in the staff bathroom, grabbed a granola bar, and headed straight to the hotel. It was my 10th straight day without rest. My body screamed with exhaustion, my feet throbbed with every step, but I pushed forward. Because the numbers in that folder didn't care how tired I was, and because I had promised. I had no idea that what I would find at that hotel would shatter me far more than any number on a page ever could. Stay with me here, because what happened in room 310 didn't just change my marriage. It exposed a betrayal I never saw coming, and I promise you'll want to hear it. The first night at the hotel, I told myself it was just work, mindless, necessary, temporary. But nothing about it was easy. The boutique hotel might have looked elegant from the lobby, but behind the scenes, it was sweat bleach and aching bones. I clocked out from the pharmacy at 4:00 p.m., changed into scrubs in the staff bathroom, and stuffed a granola bar into my mouth on the way to catch the bus downtown. By the time I pushed the heavy cleaning cart into the hotel hallways, my body already ached. 6 rooms a night, sometimes 8 if someone called out. Business travelers made the worst messes, wrinkled suits tossed over chairs. Empty bottles lined up like soldiers on the dresser, food smeared into the carpet. But I didn't complain. Every dollar mattered. Every hour I stayed upright meant one more step toward paying for that surgery. I told myself, this is what love looks like. This is what sacrifice means. The exhaustion hit me in waves. My feet burned. My back felt like it might snap each time I bent to tuck a sheet, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. At home, Margaret was still camping on the couch, critiquing every breath I took, and Adam was slipping further into silence. Here, at least I had purpose, even if it came with rubber gloves and bleach. By the 10th straight day without a break, I was running on fumes. The hotel manager, Hannah, my old classmate, texted me that morning. "You're on third floor detail tonight. Rooms 307 through 312. The third floor was the hardest, larger rooms, higher-paying guests, twice the work. I took the card anyway, dragging it down the hallway like a soldier marching into battle. When I reached room 310, I knocked twice. Housekeeping, I called out, swiping the keycard. No answer. The lock beeped and I pushed inside. The first thing I noticed wasn't the unmade bed or the half-empty minibar. It was movement by the window. And then my world split open. Adam. My husband Adam, the man who'd spent months groaning in pain, who swore he couldn't feel his legs, who'd let me sacrifice sleep sanity, and every shred of security, was standing, walking, moving without a cane, without a brace, without a hint of struggle. And he wasn't alone. A young woman, blonde, maybe mid-20s, draped in a silk robe, had her arms looped lazily around his shoulders. She laughed, head tilted back, while his hand rested at her waist. Their faces hovered inches apart, intimate, familiar. I froze in the doorway, gripping the handle of the cleaning cart so hard my knuckles went white. For a split second, I thought I was hallucinating, that exhaustion had finally tipped me into madness. But then Adam turned. His eyes locked on mine and his smile vanished. "Claire," he breathed. The room spun. My chest tightened. The air felt too thick to swallow. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the whiskey bottle I wished I still held. I just turned and walked out fast, my breath jagged tears threatening to blind me. The elevator was too slow. I ran down the stairwell, out through the lobby into the cold night air. My legs shook beneath me, but somehow they kept moving. Behind me I heard it, "Claire, wait." His footsteps pounded the pavement. I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear what kind of lie he'd try to spin. He caught up, breathless but steady, so steady. "Please," he begged, "it's not what you think." I laughed, sharp and bitter, really. "Because it looks a lot like you walking just fine with another woman wrapped around you." His hands lifted, palms out like he was defusing a bomb. "I know how it looks, but you don't understand. I needed to know if you'd still love me, if you'd stay." I was scared, Claire. Scared that if I couldn't walk, you'd leave. My mouth went dry. "So you let me believe you were paralyzed. You let me work 2 jobs. You let me sacrifice everything just to test me." He flinched, but his silence was answer enough. And in that moment on that dark street, I realized the truth. It wasn't just his legs he'd lost. It was my trust. And without trust, what was left to save? Have you ever discovered a betrayal so deep it rewrote every memory you thought was safe? Tell me below. And don't look away, because what I found out after that night made this betrayal look almost small. I walked home that night in silence, each step echoing louder than the last. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, but all I could see was Adam standing laughing, holding someone else. My husband, the man I had nearly destroyed myself for, wasn't just betraying me. He was mocking every sacrifice I had made. When I pushed open the apartment door, Margaret was perched on the couch, flipping through one of her endless magazines. She barely looked up. "You're late?" she sniffed, as if I'd been out enjoying myself instead of scrubbing toilets for strangers. I wanted to scream, to throw the truth in her face, that her precious son was a liar, that he had been walking, that he had been holding another woman. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the cruel little smile tugging at her lips, the way she always seemed to be waiting for me to fail. Instead, I said nothing. I walked past her into the bedroom where Adam lay, sprawled, eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. His chest rose and fell evenly. Not a trace of guilt showed on his face. I stood there in the doorway, watching him breathe, and felt a coldness settle inside me. If I said nothing, he would keep lying. If I confronted him now, he would spin another story, another test, another reason it was my fault. Either way, I had already lost something I could never get back. The next morning, Adam groaned dramatically when I helped him sit up. "My legs feel weak today," he muttered, as though last night had never happened. His performance was almost convincing if I hadn't seen him walk. Margaret hovered, her eyes sharp as glass. "Don't strain him, Claire. He's fragile." Fragile. The word rang in my ears. Fragile was what he wanted them to believe. Fragile was his shield, his excuse. But I knew the truth now. I forced a smile and said, "Of course, I'll take care of everything." And I did. I cooked breakfast. I folded laundry. I clocked in at the pharmacy with a smile plastered on my face. But underneath, I was planning. Not revenge, not yet. Something quieter, sharper. Proof. Because you see, betrayal is like a fire. If you rush at it with bare hands, you only get burned. But if you wait, if you gather waterwood and wind, you can control how it spreads. That night at the hotel, Hannah noticed my pale face. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. I almost told her everything, but instead I asked for something simpler. "Do you have cameras in the halls?" Her eyebrows arched. "Of course. Why?" "Just curiosity," I lied. She shrugged, but I saw the flicker of understanding in her eyes. "If you ever need footage, let me know." That was my first lifeline, the first thread of a plan. At home, I began documenting. Every groan Adam made, every moment he collapsed dramatically into the wheelchair, every pill he pretended to swallow, but left untouched on the counter. I wrote it all down in a notebook I hid in the lining of my purse. Margaret grew suspicious. "Why are you always writing?" she snapped one evening. "Recipes," I said, smoothly, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. Inside, though, I was unraveling. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying that scene in room 310. Her robe, his hand, their laughter. It gnawed at me, hollowing me out. But then I would hear Margaret snoring in the living room, or Adam groaning theatrically in his sleep, and the anger would return. Anger was fuel. Anger kept me awake, kept me focused. Still, a question haunted me. Was it just one woman, or had there been more? The answer came faster than I expected. One night, as I scrubbed the sink in room 312, I overheard two of the front desk clerks chatting outside the door. "Mr. Carter's back again," one of them giggled. "Which one's that?" "The guy with the sad story. Says he's recovering from a car accident. Always books 310, always brings a different girl." My hand froze on the sponge. The water kept running scalding hot, but I didn't feel it. A different girl. Plural. Adam hadn't just lied about walking. He hadn't just betrayed me once. He'd been parading his lies through that hotel night after night while I was scrubbing the floors beneath his feet. And that was the moment something inside me snapped. Because once you realize the betrayal isn't an accident, but a pattern, you stop being a victim. You start becoming something else entirely. And if you've ever felt that shift, you know it's the most dangerous transformation of all. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through the curtains felt like a spotlight on the stage of my life, a stage where every role I had been playing suddenly collapsed. Wife, caregiver, provider. I had been cast in a tragedy written by Adam, and I finally saw the script for what it was, a farce. He groaned as usual, clutching his legs with exaggerated pain. Margaret rushed in with a glass of orange juice, cooing over him like he was a wounded hero. "My poor boy," she said, shooting me a sharp look as if I were the villain. I forced a soft smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes. Inside, I was shaking, because I knew. I knew the truth, and knowing meant I had power. For weeks, maybe months, I had been powerless, trapped in a cycle of sacrifice and silence. But now I was holding a secret that could burn this entire house of lies to the ground. That night at the hotel, Hannah pulled me aside. "Claire, I thought you should know. Security found some clips you might want to see." She handed me a USB drive, small and unremarkable. But in my palm, it felt heavier than gold. When I got home, I locked myself in the bathroom and plugged the drive into my old laptop. And there it was. Adam, room 310. Different nights, different women. Always the same act, walking without effort, laughing like a man with no pain, no shame, no wife waiting at home. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to watch every second. Anger burned hotter with each clip. But beneath the anger was something colder, sharper. Calculation. Because evidence wasn't just proof, it was leverage. The next few days, I played my part perfectly. I cooked, I cleaned, I massaged Adam's legs when he sighed dramatically. I nodded when Margaret accused me of not being dedicated enough. All the while, my notebook grew thicker with details. Times, dates, quotes. And the USB drive was hidden deep in the lining of my handbag right next to the notebook. But one night, Adam slipped. He thought I had gone to bed. From the hallway, I heard the soft murmur of his voice. Curious, I leaned closer. He was on the phone. No, she has no idea, he said, chuckling. She actually thinks I'm helpless. The money's coming in, just a little longer, and I'll have enough to get out. My pulse hammered in my ears. The money. Suddenly, so many small mysteries clicked into place. The missing checks, the bills Margaret insisted I didn't need to see, the way Adam always discouraged me from touching his paperwork. This wasn't just betrayal of love, it was theft. The next morning, I checked the mailbox before Margaret could. Among the usual envelopes was one marked from the insurance company. I slipped it into my purse and opened it later at work. The numbers nearly made me drop it. Tens of thousands of dollars in disability payouts. Checks cashed into an account with Adam's name and Margaret's. My sacrifices weren't just funding his lies. They were profiting from them. That was the breaking point. I went home that night, calmer than I had been in months. Adam greeted me with his usual groan, Margaret with her usual sneer. I smiled sweetly, set down my purse, and sat across from them. "I've been thinking," I said softly. "Maybe it's time we considered physical therapy again. I heard it can work wonders." Adam froze. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Don't push him, Claire. He's fragile." Fragile. That word again. I almost laughed. I leaned forward, meeting Adam's eyes. "You're right. I shouldn't push. But sometimes the truth pushes all on its own." He blinked, confused. Margaret frowned. But inside me, something unshakable had settled. Because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. And soon they would realize that the quiet wife they underestimated had teeth sharper than they could imagine. Do you see it now? That moment, when silence turns into strategy, when patience becomes power? Stay with me, because the way I chose to reveal the truth didn't just end their lies. It lit the kind of fire that can never be put out. The tension in the house had become unbearable, though on the surface everything looked the same. Adam lounged in his wheelchair, groaning, when Margaret walked by perfectly on cue. Margaret hovered, fussing and glaring at me as though I were the reason her poor boy suffered. But inside, I was no longer the timid, desperate wife. I was carrying proof, and with it came a kind of icy calm. Each time I poured Adam's coffee, I imagined the USB drive hidden in my bag. Every time Margaret accused me of being distracted, I thought of the insurance letter tucked beneath my mattress. The lies were stacked so high around me that they had forgotten one truth: I was still here, watching, waiting. One evening, as Adam pretended to struggle with his crutches, I sat across from him and studied his face. He wasn't just careless, he was arrogant. Arrogance leaves footprints, and he had left them everywhere. "Maybe I should record your exercises," I said sweetly, "to track your progress." His eyes darted to Margaret, and I saw a flicker of panic. Margaret snapped, "He doesn't need that. Stop interfering." I smiled as though their words didn't sting anymore. Because the truth was, they didn't. They couldn't. Not when I knew their empire was built on sand. That night at work, Hannah found me cleaning the lobby. "Claire," she whispered, "I looked into those accounts you mentioned. You were right. Large deposits, frequent withdrawals. All tied to Adam's name. It's a setup. They're bleeding you dry." Her words solidified what I already suspected. It wasn't just betrayal, it was an operation. Adam had weaponized his injury into income, and Margaret was his accomplice. On the walk home, the night air felt different, colder. But instead of fear, I felt clarity. If they wanted to turn me into a servant, I would let them believe it until the moment I chose to strike. The next day, Margaret cornered me in the kitchen. "You think you're clever," she hissed. "Always scribbling in that notebook. Always sneaking around. Don't forget this is our house." I met her gaze for the first time without flinching. "Yes," I said calmly. "But truth doesn't belong to anyone. It reveals itself sooner or later." She blinked, thrown off by my composure. I walked away before she could answer, leaving her standing there with her mouth half open. Later, Adam tried to charm me the way he once had. He pulled me close, whispered apologies, and promised he still loved me. But his eyes betrayed him. They weren't soft with remorse. They were sharp, calculating, testing if I still believed his performance. I didn't. Not anymore. That night, I stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker below. I thought about the years I had lost working 2 jobs, giving every piece of myself to a man who treated me like a pawn. I thought about Margaret's sneers, the exhaustion, the emptiness. And then I thought about the women on those videos laughing with Adam in room 310. It should have broken me, but instead it rebuilt me. Because what Adam never understood was this: betrayal doesn't just destroy trust, it awakens survival. I whispered to myself, it's time. The next morning, I packed Adam's breakfast with extra care. I folded the napkin, neatly placed the plate in front of him, and smiled like the perfect wife. But in my heart, I was no longer serving him. I was serving justice. Have you ever held onto a secret so powerful that it felt like a weapon? That's where I was balancing between exposure and silence, and the choice of when to reveal it would determine everything that came next. Stay with me, because the way I chose to move forward didn't just change my marriage, it changed my life forever. The morning I decided to act, the house felt strangely quiet, as if it already knew something was about to break. Adam sat at the kitchen table, Margaret hovering close by both of them, rehearsing the same tired scene they had been playing for months. He groaned, she sighed, and I smiled politely all the while holding a storm behind my lips. But what they didn't know was that the storm was no longer chaos, it was strategy. At work, I met Hannah again. She handed me another stack of papers. "Claire," she said softly, "you've got more than enough now. You don't need to keep living like this. Take it to someone, a lawyer, the police, anyone." I nodded, but in my gut I knew it wasn't just about turning them in. It was about reclaiming the narrative they had stolen from me. For too long, Adam and Margaret had painted me as weak, naive, disposable. Simply exposing them wasn't enough. They needed to feel the weight of every ounce of pain they'd forced onto me. That night I set the table for dinner like I always did. Plates aligned perfectly, silverware gleaming under the kitchen light. Adam cracked jokes, Margaret laughed too loudly. They thought they were in control, oblivious to the evidence waiting in my purse. The USB drive, the insurance letters, Hannah's reports. Halfway through the meal, I leaned back and said I was thinking maybe we should all take a family trip. A change of scenery. Margaret smirked. "On whose dime you barely make enough to keep this place afloat." Her words would have once cut deep, now they just fueled the fire. I turned to Adam, my voice soft. "Don't you think the ocean air would do your legs some good? Or maybe a cabin in the mountains? A place where you could walk freely." For a split second, his fork froze mid-air. Margaret's laugh died in her throat. They knew, or at least they sensed. I had cracked the script. I didn't press further that night. That wasn't the moment. But as I cleared the plates, I whispered to myself soon. Later, in the privacy of my room, I rehearsed what I would say. I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection, both familiar and foreign. "You thought you broke me," I whispered. "But all you did was give me sharper teeth." I imagined the reveal the moment their smug faces shattered, and I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of their lies, not of their power, not even of the fallout, because truth once unleashed can't be caged again. The next day I visited a lawyer. I laid out the evidence like pieces on a chessboard, the recordings, the insurance fraud, the fake disability claims. The lawyer's eyebrows rose higher with each document. "Claire, this isn't just betrayal," he said gravely. "This is criminal. With what you have here, you could bury them." Walking out of his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was positioning. That night, I returned home to the same charade. Adam groaned on the couch. Margaret fussed with his blanket. But this time, I didn't see actors convincing an audience. I saw two people about to be unmasked. I carried the laundry past them, humming softly. They didn't notice the notebook tucked under my arm, or the way my eyes lingered on them with quiet defiance. Because here's the truth, sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the explosion of rage. It's the silence before the storm. And that's exactly where I was standing at the edge of revelation, holding the fuse. Do you feel it? That tension right before everything cracks. Stay with me, because what happened next didn't just expose Adam and Margaret. It turned the entire story on its head. The day of reckoning began like any other, quiet, ordinary, almost forgettable. The sun filtered through the curtains, Adam's fake groans echoed down the hallway, and Margaret clattered pans in the kitchen with her usual theatrical sighs. But I wasn't the same woman who had endured this routine for months. I was armed with truth, and truth has a way of changing the weight of every moment. I had planned it carefully. I wasn't going to confront them in anger, not anymore. Anger is too easily dismissed as hysteria. No, what I wanted was precision, the kind of strike that left no room for denial. That evening, I invited Adam and Margaret into the living room. The television was off, the lights were dim, and my laptop sat open on the coffee table. "I have something to show you," I said, my voice calm. Adam smirked, his arrogance untouchable. "What is it this time, Claire? Another one of your silly suspicions." Margaret rolled her eyes. If this is about money again, don't embarrass yourself. I clicked the screen. The first video filled the room, the grainy hotel footage of Adam, very much not disabled, moving freely. His laughter rang out as he wrapped his arms around another woman. Silence fell. Adam's smirk collapsed. Margaret's jaw slackened. This, I said, my tone steady, is the man you both insisted was helpless. The man I've broken my back supporting. The man who has been draining every cent while I cleaned floors and scrubbed toilets. Adam shot up from the couch without his crutches instinct overriding the act. It was almost poetic, the lie unmasking itself. He froze, realizing what he'd done. Sit down, I said firmly, louder than I had ever spoken to him. The show's over. Margaret sputtered, trying to recover. This doesn't prove anything. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I cut her off. I pulled out the insurance letters, Hannah's reports, the files from the lawyer. Fraud, theft, betrayal. Every piece is here. And do you know what the best part is? None of this is my word against yours. It's evidence. Adam's face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear where arrogance used to live. Margaret opened her mouth again, but no words came. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. You thought I was weak. You thought I'd stay quiet forever. But here's the thing about people like me: we endure, we absorb, and then we strike. And when we strike, it's final. I closed the laptop with a snap that made them both flinch. I've already met with a lawyer, I continued. I've already prepared everything. You'll be investigated, charged, exposed. And when that happens, you won't just lose me, you'll lose everything. Adam finally spoke, his voice cracking. Claire, please, we can fix this. I'll change. The irony nearly made me laugh. You don't get to change because you're caught. You change because you're human. And you stopped being human to me a long time ago. Margaret whispered, you can't do this to your family. My family, I said, locking eyes with her. You stopped being family the moment you decided I was expendable. Blood doesn't make family, loyalty does. And neither of you ever had that. I stood, leaving them stunned in the quiet room. For once it was their silence filling the air, not mine. That night I packed a small bag. I didn't slam doors or make threats. I simply left, carrying my evidence and my dignity with me. As I stepped outside, the crisp night air felt like freedom. But the story wasn't finished, because exposure is one thing. What comes after the ripple effects, the reckoning that was still waiting on the horizon. Sometimes the most terrifying part of justice isn't revealing the truth. It's watching what people do when their masks are ripped away. And believe me, what Adam and Margaret did next was something I could never have predicted. Stay close, because the twist that followed turned everything upside down. When I walked out, that night bag slung over my shoulder, I thought the story had ended. I thought I had delivered the final blow. But endings are never that simple, are they? Especially when people like Adam and Margaret are cornered. Desperation makes even the most arrogant scramble for survival. The morning after I left, I received a call from the lawyer. His tone was measured, professional. Claire, I've already filed the preliminary motions. The investigation will move fast, given the amount of evidence you've gathered. His words should have comforted me, but they didn't. They only confirmed what I already knew: Adam and Margaret wouldn't go quietly. Sure enough, that afternoon, my phone lit up with messages, first from Adam, then from Margaret. Apologies, pleas, manipulative half-promises. Adam wrote, I'm sick, Claire. You know that. Please don't destroy me. Margaret chimed in with, think of what people will say. Do you really want to air our dirty laundry? For years, those words would have shackled me, but not anymore. I didn't even respond. Silence was my final act of defiance. Then came the smear campaign. Mutual friends called to say Adam was spinning a tale, that I was unstable, vindictive, even cruel. Margaret backed him, painting herself as the dutiful sister-in-law caught in the crossfire. It was predictable. They thought lies would save them the same way they had relied on lies for years. But lies are fragile when truth has already been set in motion. The first crack came when the insurance investigator reached out to me for follow-up. We've interviewed Adam's doctor, she explained, and the records don't match his claims. It's unraveling faster than we expected. I felt a quiet surge of justice, not loud or triumphant, but steady, like the ground finally firming beneath my feet. Days later, Hannah from work pulled me aside, her eyes shining. Claire, people are talking, not about Adam's lies about you, about how you stood up, how you refused to break. You should know, you're inspiring people. That caught me off guard. I hadn't thought of myself as inspiring. I had just been surviving. but maybe survival, when done loudly enough, becomes something bigger? The final twist came when Adam himself showed up at my door. No wheelchair, no cane, just Adam's small, deflated trembling. He begged, he wept. "Claire, please. I'll lose everything. Don't do this." I stared at him, this man who had once towered over me with cruelty. Now he looked like a shadow of himself, and in that moment I realized something: I didn't need revenge anymore. I already had it. Revenge wasn't the evidence or the court case or even their public humiliation. Revenge was walking away free while they remained trapped in the lies they had built. I closed the door gently in his face. No screaming, no theatrics, just the quiet certainty that this chapter was over. Later, as I sat alone, I recorded my thoughts, not for Adam or Margaret, but for myself, and maybe for anyone who might stumble across my story one day. "You don't owe loyalty to people who weaponize it against you," I said softly into the recorder. "Family is not defined by blood, but by truth, by love, by freedom. If someone tries to chain you with guilt, remember this: you hold the key, always." I paused, then added what I wish someone had told me years ago. Don't just watch stories like mine. Share yours. Speak. Because silence doesn't protect you, it imprisons you. And if you're still here with me, if my story has meant something, then don't just leave quietly. Stay, subscribe, comment. Be part of this community where no one's voice is erased. As the recording ended, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. Adam and Margaret would face their consequences in court, in whispers among neighbors, in the cold isolation of knowing their masks had been torn away. But me, I was free. And freedom, I realized, is the sweetest form of justice. The dust eventually settled, as it always does. Court hearings came and went, paperwork piled high, neighbors whispered, and the names Adam and Margaret slowly faded into background noise. What lingered wasn't their downfall, it was my clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by their lies or weighed down by their demands. I was simply Claire. I moved into a small apartment downtown, nothing extravagant, but it was mine. The first morning I brewed coffee there, sunlight streaming across the counter. I caught myself smiling, an easy, unforced smile. Freedom doesn't roar. Sometimes it hums quietly in the background, reminding you that the air you breathe is finally your own. Friends began to notice the change. "You look lighter," Hannah said one evening over dinner. She was right. Without the constant manipulation, my spirit wasn't caged anymore. I could choose my own hours, my own company, my own future. Even something as small as reading a book without interruption felt like a victory. But perhaps the most important change was internal. I stopped asking why me and started asking what now. That question unlocked something powerful. It reminded me that stories like mine aren't just about suffering. They're about rebuilding, reclaiming, and redefining. And so I share this with you not as a tale of bitterness, but as proof. Proof that no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how heavy the chains, there is always a way out. If you're listening now, know this: your freedom might be waiting at the edge of one decision, one truth spoken aloud. Don't be afraid to step toward it. Stay here with me, keep watching, keep sharing, because none of us are as alone as we think. Together we are stronger. Together we are free.